Hello, and what a great day to sew something wonderful. I'm Kia with Kia B, and today we're going to be taking a look at a fun little project that I do every couple of weeks with all of my scraps. In a video a few weeks ago, you kind of saw my crazy basket of scraps. Well, today we're going to be working on busting those up. I love to use this Scrappy project planner that I got that is from the quilter Lori Holt. She designed this with It's Sew Emma patterns, and it really breaks it down nicely. It has lots of room for you to create your own projects with your scraps. And then the thing that I like most about it, it is a planner, and so you've got a breakdown of weeks and days and to-do list. It makes it very nice. Here's kind of like the week at a glance. This is nice because you can lay it out. But go further out of the planner and she gives you some really great tips. One of my favorite tips is actually her breaking up her scraps. And so she has these bins, and you'll kind of see from this picture, she has these bins where she divides them up by size. As I got my hands on this last fall and kind of read through this, I really adopted this idea of breaking up my scraps. Instead of having this cluster drawer of fabric that just collects and it is a mess, I started breaking them down. And it was a hard thought at first because I thought, oh my goodness, once I cut it, I can't make it bigger. And so you have to get past that and you can make some beautiful scrappy projects. So after the Scrappy project baskets, then she actually goes into some more tips and tricks for you. And lastly, she has actual Scrappy project patterns in here. So she takes lots of scraps and she gives you patterns that you can use with your own scraps at home. So I love this book. Let's take a look closer into how we break these up. I'm going to do a few scraps with you, and then you'll just kind of see me breaking up my other scraps. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment down below and I'll be able to answer those for you. So let's take this one cut at a time. Materials that you'll need for this project are a cutting mat. I've chosen to use a smaller cutting mat than I typically do because it is rotating, and using scraps, I think that's really going to help me a lot. So I just use a rotating cutting mat. You'll need a ruler. I use this Cute Cuts ruler by Lori Holt. This is smaller. It works nicely with my scraps. And then you'll need a rotary tool. And then let me show you a closer version of the Scrappy project planner. So like I said, this is an It's Sew Emma patterns planner, and it has room for you to, whoops, don't want to show you projects. It has room for you to create your own projects and make project lists and kind of drawings of your new quilts that you'd like to make. And then here is our weekly planner portion. And so this is really nice because it's 1 week per page. And so you can create to-do list and things that you would like to get done. And then here is the thing that we're going to be focusing on, and this is the idea of going ahead and busting up your scraps into certain sizes, and so this is what we're going to be focusing on here. So this is all in the Scrappy project planner. You can pick this up at It's Sew Emma or Fat Quarter Shop, and it's well worth it. I absolutely love it. And there's no dates on it, so it's not like you don't have to use it for just 1 year. There's no dates on it. You actually date it yourself. The next thing you'll need is obviously your scraps. Y'all, I'm so embarrassed by how many scraps I have, but this humongous thing, I don't know, I have this wire basket that I got at the Target dollar spot, and I mean, it's just packed full of scraps from projects. I have not done a scrap buster in months, so I've got a lot to get through here. Don't worry, you're not gonna have to watch me do all of it. The next thing that I picked up at my local store, I think I got them at Target. I think they were 5 for $4, 5 bins for $4. They're just these little bins. I think they're Sterilite actually. So they're small. Here I can actually tell you the exact size. They look like 8 by, let's see, 8x7 bins, and they're deep. And so what I've done is I've actually labeled each one of my bins with the what she suggests to bust up your scraps into. And so I've labeled each one of mine. I just kind of keep them under my sewing desk and I pull them out for this exact project. And so I can just throw my scraps in here. You'll see I've got some lots of things. I've got Christmas fabric in here. I mean, I've just done a ton of projects. I cut them up into these scraps, and then when I know I'm working on a small pattern or a pattern with scraps, then I know what bin I can pull. It's really actually quite nice. So what I like to do is I will pull out all of my bins and I'll line them at the front of my desk. And that way I can see, I'll line them from biggest to smallest, and that way I can kind of just in my head keep the sizes that I know I want. Okay, so let's take a look at the sizes. Let me flip open here. Okay, so she actually suggests that you have a 1.5 inch basket, 2.5 inch basket, 3.5, 5, and 7. Now I have figured out that I have a lot of 2.5 inch scraps. So I have 2 buckets for that. I have one that is 2.5 inch squares and then one that is 2.5 inch strips. We all have those jelly roll strips that are left over after we've done a project, and so that's where all of mine get thrown in. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bins. So that's really nice. So I'll just take those out and I'll lay them in front of my desk and I will just start chopping. So let me kind of show you here an example. I'm just going to pull from my pile here. Some of you may recognize this fabric. I just used this fabric in our last tutorial of making a baby quilt for a sweet homeschool friend of ours who is adopting a baby. So I'm going to look at this scrap. I can see very easily that there is selvage edge on here, and so I know that my measurement cannot include that selvage edge. So I'll actually go ahead and cut it off. And then whatever size this strip is closest to for my bins, that's what size I'm going to cut it. So for example, let me see here. Let me go ahead and cut this off a little bit. So this is obviously like where I was maybe piecing the back of the quilt. So I'm just going to hack that up. There we go. And I'll work with one piece at a time here, okay? So I'm going to line up my selvage edges here. And again, line them up. So I'm cutting actually 4 layers at a time. And then I'm going to cut that selvage off really simply. Throw that out, okay? So I'm going to line mine up with that straight edge over to the side of my ruler, or my cutting mat, okay? And I'm going to look and see what is the closest basket that I can get. And for this particular one, it's 3.5. So I'm just going to chop at 3.5. Make sure I'm all lined up here. 3.5 and 3.5. We're good to go. So that's my 3.5 inch strip. I'm not going to worry about cutting this up even further. I'm not even going to worry about making these lines straight, because as I'm using this with anything, whatever I use it for, I mean, I'm going to cut that up anyway. I'm going to re-straighten it. And so there's my 3.5. So I would fold this up and I would throw it in my bin. That is 3.5 inch scraps. Throw it in there and move on to the next one. So let's see a different piece. This one's a little bit smaller. There, in my opinion, is no scrap too small. I can reuse whatever. This, I mean, these are 1 3/4 inch half square triangles. I used them. I made a quilt for my niece out of this, and I use the half square triangles later for an iPad case. I mean, I use every last bit of my scraps. So, same thing for this. I'm just going to fold it up. Now, if you have something like this where one side is definitely more wide than the other, you want to go off the skinnier edge, because you really don't want to to mismeasure. So I'm going to straighten up an edge here, just like this. Scoot it over to the side here, like this. And I'm going to look to see what size is that closest to. So this is a 2.5. Okay. Line it up, chop it off, get rid of this tiny little bit, throw that in my 2.5 inch bucket. Are y'all kind of getting the hang of it? Okay. Now this is a much larger scrap. If it's a fat quarter, or even really a fat eighth, which this is probably a fat eighth, I won't cut that down any further. But for the sake of showing you a 7-inch scrap, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So what I would do here is, I mean, this is a pretty big piece of fabric, okay? It's already straightened on one side here. So I'm going to line that up. And this is actually 11.5 inches wide. So I would probably leave this, but I'm going to go ahead and chop it up because I know what I'll use it for and I can break that down. So I'm going to line it up at the 7. Okay. Chop that up. So this part goes in my 7-inch bucket or basket, whatever you want to call it. Now look, we've got this huge piece left. I don't want to throw that away, obviously. I can make more scraps out of that. So I'm going to move it to the side here, line up my straight edge on the edge of my ruler. The closest one to me is going to be 3.5. So I will line it up again and cut the 3.5 inch mark. Now, this is up to you. This is not quite an inch, which is our smallest bucket is 1.5 inches. Sometimes I'll still keep these in my scrap bucket because maybe I need leaders or enders on my sewing machine. These are great for that, so I'll just throw them in the bottom of my scrap bucket to have those. So then this goes in my 3.5 inch basket. Okay? Let's talk about directional fabrics really quick. So this piece right here, I love this fabric and I have seriously used the devil out of the fat quarter that I had of it. And so directional fabric can be kind of hard, and especially when you've got like this choppy angle here. So use your discretion on what you'd like to do with this. For me, I'm just going to leave it as it is, throw it at the bottom of my scrap bin. I don't forget about this fabric because I love it so much. So it's safe for me just to throw it in my scrap bin. I'm not going to forget about it. Okay. The next thing I pull out is I throw all of my extra binding in there. You'll notice that this is the binding from a video that we did for that same quilt for that mom. And so I'm just going to throw all of my pre-pressed binding strips in my 2.5 inch strip basket. And these are so great. I saw somebody on Instagram tag the other day that they love keeping their binding because on Scrappy projects, you can do a Scrappy binding. You just connect like you would if you had another strip of this and you would connect them at the diagonal at the bias and then just keep using that. I can't wait. I haven't done that yet and I cannot wait to do that because that just seems like such a fun idea. So on a Scrappy quilt, a Scrappy binding can be great. All right, I think you all have the hang of it. I'm gonna go ahead and finish cutting up most of my scraps and I'll see you back here when I am finished. I love an empty scrap bin. It is wonderful. It just makes my little organizational heart happy. And so I've got all of my scraps busted up. They're all in their coordinating bins, and that way it's easy for me to find as I'm project planning for scrapping. I hope that you all enjoyed this tutorial today and it's helpful for you, and we will see you next week. Thanks and have a great day.